going to talk about today is Aqua-Flo Flo-Master pumps. We're going to rebuild this pump. When I say rebuild, we're going to do a pump, seal, front bearing, possibly an impeller. This is an XP2E version, but we're going to talk about a few of the ins and outs of the Flo-Master series and how you repair it. Stay tuned. Alright, first I want to point out, if you haven't watched the videos, the XP2 and the XP2E both look very similar. This is a Chinese knockoff. Basically, it's what we call a CMP version, which is kind of a universal version of this wet end. And then this is the Chinese Guangdong version. You can see they all look very, very similar. If you can't tell the difference between these and you're trying to buy parts, then go back and watch the video where I show you the difference between these three and how to tell. If you're trying to buy an entire wet end, this one will work in the place of the, this one actually, if you're trying to buy an entire wet end, then this one, which is the CMP version that is 48 and 56, you can see it's got both knurls in it, will work in place of the XP2. They're basically identical as far as the size and the fit and that kind of stuff. The Guangdong will not fit the other two. The shafts are different on the pumps and that sort of thing, even though they look very similar in size. It's a completely different deal. So take this right here out of the way. Take this out of the way and this out of the way. The next thing I'm going to show you is a lot of pumps have the word Flo-Master written on them. You can see that this is a Flo-Master, but this is a 48 frame Flo-Master. So the way you can tell the difference is, obviously this one is a lot smaller than this one, but one way is just simply measure across the back. The 48 frame is going to be about 5 5/8 if you measure across the back. The 56 frame is going to be about 6 1/4 if you measure across the back. That's one way. Another thing that you have is you have the 1.5" versus 2 inch. 2 inch is going to measure about, I'm going to go the other way so you can see it. 2 inches is going to measure about 3 inches across the threads. 1.5" is going to measure about 2 1/4 across the threads if you measure like that. So that is considered 1.5. This is considered 2 inch. If you look at these pumps, you'll notice that this is 1.5. This is a side discharge. This one is a side discharge as well. This one is in the 3 o'clock position right now. Turn straight up. 12 o'clock over here would be 9 o'clock. So you can turn the wet ends. The way you would do that, if you just did it wet ends, you simply pull the through bolts out. You can see that they stick all the way through. And if you loosen your through bolts, you can simply take the impeller and just turn it, or take the wet end and turn it like that. So that's another little note there, a little tidbit for you. So we're going to get started. We're going to take this pump apart. This is an XP2E. And we're going to take it apart and we are going to go through it and show you how to repair this pump right here. First, I'm going to take the face off the pump. And if you're using an impact, you got to be careful. These things are plastic, so you can damage them, so you got to go easy. I don't impact them in, but I will impact them out. So just take your screws. There's 8 screws in it. And these, the faceplate comes off fairly easy. So I'm going to get those out of the way, and you can see I didn't even have to pry it off. These, the seal is kind of pinched in between the front, and you see somebody actually put some silicone on there. While if I was going to do it, I wouldn't put much silicone on there. You can see there's the wear ring. And what the wear ring does is seals between the suction side of the pump where it pulls the water in and the pressure side. It's kind of the gasket, if you will, between them, and it flows between. So now you've got this impeller in here. So traditionally the way we would pull the impeller out is on the back of the motor. There's a place right here, and some of them will have a little plug there. This one, the plug's missing. But what you do is take a flat screwdriver. It's got a flat screwdriver fitting in there. Turn it up so you can see it. And you hold the flat screwdriver side and grab the impeller and twist it out. This one's not going to do it. You can see that it's very rusty up in here. And so therein lies the problem. So the way we're going to fix that is, first we're going to mark the motor. We're going to mark the housing because I want to put it back together exactly how it came apart. We're going to mark the front and the back. And this motor's actually been apart before, I can tell, because there's some hash marks on it. I'm going to pull the through bolts out, which are 5/16 on a 56 frame, and they're 1/4 inch on a 48. That's another way you can tell the difference between a 48 and a 56. If you have 5/16 through bolts, then it's a 56. If you've got 1/4 inch through bolts, then it's a 48. So what I did was pull the through bolts out after I marked it. Next, I'm going to tap the rear cover off first so I can get the other side out. And so there's a little bit of a lip right there, and I'm using just a brass hammer and just light tapping. Not going to damage it. Tapping the back cover off. So you can work it right off, and you see that's what it looks like inside the back. Now, some pumps has a 2-speed switch that's actually made on the back cover. This particular one, the 2-speed switch, which is right here, is actually slid in. So you can, once you take the cover off, you can actually pull the switch out. You can see I'm not going to pull it out, but it will come out. It basically pinches in at the bottom and at the top in these slots. The cover goes on it, and that's what holds it in place. Next, I'm going to take my screwdriver and I'm going to tap the front cover loose. So now I can pull, you can see I pulled the entire stator out. Now this one has been damaged right here. You can see that this part of the fan, which is actually plastic, has gotten damaged. Something got caught in it. And I can see that the bearing, if you look right in there, you can see that the bearing has started coming apart. So we definitely have a bearing issue here. So I'm going to get set up. We're going to put this in a vise, pull the bearing, pull the impeller off, pull the bearing out, change it, and put it all back together. Stay tuned. All right, so we've got the vise, and what I do is I put something in it to protect the stator, because we don't want to damage the stator or damage any part of it. I'm going to stick this down in the vise so we can put some pressure on it. And you don't have to really over tighten it, just snug it up. Just like that. Now I'm going to see if I can turn the impeller off with my fingers, with my hand, and the answer is I can. So if you can't do it with your hands, that's actually a good sign. Then I would use oil filter pliers. I've had these pliers for over 30 years. In fact, about 32 years. So the back of the impeller you can see is damaged right there. It should have a shaft on it, and it should look like that right there. Pull that. It should have that shaft on it. You can see the difference right there. So we're going to replace the shaft and put a new seal on. That's the wet end part. This is the volute, which is the back, and you can see that it was leaking. So now we're going to pull this part off so I can get to the, and it still turns, it's just rough. You see, I should be able to just spin it and it just go, and you can see it won't spin. It stops. So I'm going to take the plate off. Just tap it on it with a brass hammer. Just go easy, and if it spins, you can see it comes off a lot easier. Now you can actually see that the bearing, you can see that the back part, this part, the little rubber piece that holds the grease in it, was out. So this bearing has actually come apart on the inside, and it's very rough. So I'm going to change this bearing, and also the back bearing's rough. Once we change this, I'll show you the back bearing. But we're going to clean this up and pull this bearing off and get her all ready to go. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is take a 3/8 by 16 die, and I'm going to thread chase it. And you can see those threads are actually in good shape. But if you need to know, for all standard American pumps, Waterway, Aqua-Flo, Stay Right, Vico, Power Right, all of those different brands, the Balboa brands, which is Vico or Stay Right, this is the right thing. This will not work on the Guangdong Chinese. It's completely different. So what I do is I take a knurl out of the inside of the impeller. So if you look at that impeller, you see that there's a brass fitting inside there. So the brass fitting that's actually inside the Aqua-Flo is different than this one. It actually has a head on it. So it works great for this. So what I do is break my impeller open and use that to go on here. So in this case I'm using one out of a different kind of pump, and I'm using a socket as the flat part, but this actually has a dome on the top of it. So the next thing I would do is I'm going to apply just a little bit of heat to ensure that the bearing is loose, but I don't want to apply much heat because this does have a plastic fan right here, and I don't want to damage the fan. So I'm not going to put much heat on here. I'm going to let me clean it with my file first real quick. I'm going to put this under here. I'm going to take a file and I'm going to just clean up right around the bearing edge, which this one is actually graduated down just a hair right there. So it's usually not an issue with these getting them off. All right, I'm going to apply just a little more heat. Not too much heat. Alright, now I'm going to put my safety glasses and my gloves on. While that thing is getting ready, because we're going to be dealing with a little bit of heat right here. So you're probably not going to have this tool. I have the luxury of this, so you've got to use a bearing puller or a 2-prong or a 3-prong puller, but this is what I use. It's very simple and it cages the bearing. Okay, now, and I like to use the impact on this particular tool because it gives it an extra degree of pull because it's actually hammering it just a little bit. So here we go. Glasses on. Alright, so now I'm going to have to pull my socket off because it's larger than the hole in the puller, but I'm not going to have to put much more pressure, so it'll be just fine. So there is your bearing. You can see it was a clean pull, it pulled right off. No issues. And this bearing was definitely bad. You can see that it came apart on the inside. You can see the guts are trying to come out, and what happened was it moved this thing forward, or moved it forward, and this started hitting and it tore it up, and it also caused it to leak. So we're going to put a brand new bearing on. I'm also going to pull the rear bearing. I'm going to show you real quick on the rear bearing. This bearing has a little issue. We're going to do the same thing on the rear. Just, it doesn't have the shaft that you got to deal with. But look at this bearing. See? You hear it? That bearing is bad. It should spin. And it's stopping. So I'm just going to cage it. Same way. And in this case you can actually press on the back of the shaft with your puller. No big deal. There we go. Pulled right off. So this bearing is not bad in the same sense that the front one is bad, but it needed to be replaced anyway because it is rough. So you can actually hear it. It's got that roughness to it, plus you can see grease coming out of it. You see that? So that's a no-go. So I'm going to press the bearings on momentarily. Stay tuned. All right, now we're ready to put the bearing back on. I'm going to put the bearing on the back part first. So what I'm going to do is use my same setup that I had before. And you notice this has a little stopper on it. So that's the stopping point for your bearing. So you find a socket that will fit over the shaft. You can see that will actually go over the shaft. That touches the inside of the bearing. And that's the appropriate socket. And then you just use your hammer and just simply tap it into place. It's just that simple. You see that? And you see that it's right up against the little snap ring. Alright, to put the other side on, you flip it over. Now I'm going to have to remove this part right here now in order to get it on there, because the socket will not fit down over that part because it's a hair bigger than the shaft. Get that out of the way. Take the new bearing, just drop it down there. Take the socket, put it over. Actually, let me use this side. You actually hear it change sounds when it gets to the bottom. You see that's all the way in right there. So now we're going to put this back in the motor. I'm going to get set up for that. Stay tuned. Alright, so we've got this part ready. I've got the other part ready. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my faceplate, and you can see that it's a little bit dirty, so I'm going to clean it up real quick. And there's not really that much in it, but I'm going to get the grime out of here, and we'll go to the next step. We're just about ready to put her together. Alright, now I've got this clean. You can see I just cleaned the grease and the grime out of it. Now I'm going to take it, and the way I'd put that on is you can start it with your hands, but it's not going to go completely on. All I'll do is just take my little brass hammer and just kind of spin it as I'm tapping it in place. And it is all the way on. You can see that it's in there. And it broke these little spokes off the fan, but I don't think that that's going to make it overheat. It's still got enough on there, so we're going to proceed with this. So you just slip your stator back in. And remember, we marked the faceplate. Push it through. And there's our mark. Tap it into place. Now on the back, I'm going to simply put it up there and slip it into place, and you can see I've got a mark right there as well. And there is, on the back, there is a wave washer, by the way, back here. You can see that it's right there. And it is, in fact, I'm going to clean this a little bit. This is pretty nasty too. So stay tuned. So I got her all cleaned up, and you can see there's the wave washer that goes back there. I got that little bit of grease out of there that was from coming out of the old bearing that had started coming apart. And I'm going to just gently tap this into place and line it up, and you can see that lines and this lines. Now I'm going to stick my through bolts through and put nuts on the front of them. I'm just going to do two. I'm going to do one. And I'm going to do two. Sometimes you got to mess with these through bolts a little bit to get them lined up, because there's a hole that they go through in the magnet. There she goes. And then just put a nut on the front on each one of them. And I'm going to take my impact and lightly tighten them. Now I'm going to take my hammer and kind of tapped it 2 sides. It didn't have the through bolt in it. Make sure everything is nice and snug. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this pump 115 volts and clean this shaft up. So stay tuned. I'll show you how to do it. Alright, so this right here is what we're going to do. We're going to take this back plate off. And you're going to find the black and the white wire. You can see there, right there, there's black, which is low speed, and there's white, which is the neutral, but it's hot on a 220 pump. And if you look right here, it actually shows you that this is common. That's high speed, which would be red in this case. This is low speed. So 2 is low, 1 is high, and 5 is common. You see that? So when you're looking in the back here, pull the white wire off. And another way you could do this, now I'm doing this with a 110 volt source. So I'm pulling the white wire off, and I'm going to put my white wire on there from a 110 volt. And when I say 110, 110, 120, 125 is all the same thing. And then pulling the black wire off, because all we need to do is just spin the motor enough that we can use it like a lathe. And so I'm going to hook my black wire right here, and then I'm going to undo ground and hook my ground wire. And it's just that simple. And see, I'm going to be able to plug this in the wall just like that. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is plug this in, power it up. And it will not hurt it to run on 110. It just won't run as fast as it normally would, and you don't need to run it long. So the first thing you're going to do after you put your safety glasses on is take a pair of pliers that's hardened and just touch this. It knocks all that loose rust off of there. Next, if there's any big stuff, it'll knock that off. You take your file and just run it, take that little edge off. And what happens is when this thing gets water on this shaft, the shaft metal expands when it gets wet. So it'll bow out a little bit. You want to make it where it will easily get it with a wire brush and clean it up. So now we're going to check our work. We're going to take a flat screwdriver, stick it in the back, hold the shaft, and this should just screw right on. See how easily that's going on? You want it to bottom completely out. Just like that. So that shaft is clean and in good shape and ready for the seal on the impeller. So we're going to put our seal on, and we'll go through the wet end next and get it ready. So this pump is ready. All you're going to do now is put the wires back where they came from, put your back cover back on, and you're ready for the next phase. Alright, so the next thing you've got to do, we're going to put this wet end together. But the way you pick your impeller is you do it by my chart. 12 amps, which is what this motor reads, would be 3 horsepower. So this is an XP2E. An XP2 has, this part is smaller on an XP2, so make sure you choose a 2E or a 2. And another thing that you'll see is some of them will actually have a part number written on them on these Aqua-Flo wet ends. So that's another way that you could do it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to change this part. On the waterway, the spring part of it is down in the volute here. Every other wet end except for the Guangdong is the ceramic part is down in here. So we're going to change the ceramic part first. All you do is turn your wet end over and just take a flat screwdriver and just lightly tap it right out. It'll come right out very easily. And you can see that I just removed it, and you see it was siliconed in, which is correct. That's just a light coating of silicone. Keeps it from spinning and moving around, and it makes for a better seal. So that's why I do offer seal kits with the silicone, with my special blend that's made specifically for hot tubs. Alright, so I got this cleaned up, and I also cleaned the face up. Somebody had siliconed around it and put way too much. So, and inside here you can see that it actually says XP2E right there. Can you see that without the shadows? XP2E right there. So that's another way that you can tell that you've got the E over the XP2. So to install this, what I'm going to do is take my seal and put a light coat of silicone around it. Not much, you just want enough that it's going to seal it in there and also make it slick and help it slide in. That's another attribute of silicone, is it's slick. So I'm going to take this and just smear it like that right there. Slip it down in there. And on these I use a 1/2 inch coupler. It would fit right on there, and just gently push it right down in, just like that. Just that simple. You can see where it's at on the back side. Now I'm going to put the part on the impeller. So we're going to do the same thing with this, but I'm going to actually slicken the shaft up on the impeller. Ever so light. Not much, just enough to help it slide. Slicking it up, and you see that right there. Now I'm just going to take this. You see there's a rubber piece right there, and you just hold that in one hand, and just, you see with that silicone, it'll slide right down on there, just like that right there. That is a properly installed seal. So now the seal will go inside just like that right there. That's what it looks like from the back. So we're going to put her together. So now we're going to take the through bolts back loose, take these nuts off, slip the other 2 through bolts back in, get them ready for the volute, which is the back part of the wet end right here. I'm going to just slip it up there and impact it, but just slowly. Do one, get one started, another started. Kind of line her up. In an X pattern. Okay, that is on there and it's nice and tight, and that's what it looks like with the shaft sticking through. So I'm going to clean some of this silicone off out here and get that part ready. Next, we're going to take the impeller and we're going to slip it in. I'm going to hold the shaft with my flat screwdriver and just screw it in until you feel it bottom out. Okay, that is it, and you can see that the impeller is close to, you see the distance that it is from the edge. It's got a little bit of distance right there, about maybe a 1/16 of an inch. That should be all the way in. Next thing you're going to do is put the wear ring with the fat part out. Then I'm going to put a very light coat of silicone around this part again. And you see this got a little, just a little seal, a little gasket on the edge. It's not in a groove like some of them are, like some brands. This is just a little thing on the edge. I'm not going to put much around, but I'm going to put enough to make a seal. Just like that right there. And you line that up. You see that little spot with that little spot right there. So it will go like this. Boom, that is on there. You start your screws in it. And what I'm going to do is run the screws in with my impact, but not too tight. I'm not going to snug it up. I'm going to snug it up by hand. Just ever so lightly in a cross pattern. Just kind of pull it in. And if you go too hard, you're going to break the ear off the face, or you'll pull one of the brass knurls out. Just ever so slightly. And then a nice cross pattern with your Phillips screwdriver. About as much pressure as I can put on it with a twist like that. That's what I put on it. Even almost like an impact. I mean, not an impact, but a torque wrench. I'm going to even click like a torque wrench. Alright, and I'm going to go around one more time. Just double check, make sure I did not miss one. Voila, there you have it, a completed Aqua-Flo Flo-Master XP2. What I've just shown you how to do doesn't just work with this pump, it works with basically any brand. They're all very, very similar. And you see the parts that I replaced. Busted impeller, new seal set, 2 bearings. We have them all in the store. If you look over my head, you can click that banner and it will take you to the Flo-Master series parts that these are in. If you don't need Flo-Master, go to that website, click that and go to the website where you see Flo-Master. Click in the box on the top left, or top left, actually be your top left, yep, and put in your brand. Waterway, Stay Right, Aqua-Flo, Vico, Guangdong LX, put them in. I don't know much, but I do know hot tubs. I am the Spa Guy, and we are Hot Tub Parts of America.